So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. Welcome back. Before we start, I would just like to say what a wonderful evening we had yesterday, and I will never again look at a Finnish zither in the same way. Just an amazingly versatile musician there last night. I'd like to say thank you to our hosts, the Finnish EU presidency. Many people have commented to me on the quality of the food here. So again, thank you. And also the fact that the Finns are so all-embracing, taking into account all diversities and food tastes. So it was very, very much appreciated. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, if an alarm goes off, please get up quietly. The guards will come upstairs. They'll be identifiable in high visibility jackets. Follow them down the stairs, and the assembly point is at the back of the building in the courtyard. The other thing I would like to say is just between you and me, the Prime Minister will be here. But he's not coming to our meeting. He's coming to another meeting. Now, originally, we thought that while he was there, we wouldn't be able to go out. We would have to stay here while he was there. But you all cleared the security check. And apparently, when we do go out for coffee, if by any chance you do see the Prime Minister, behave yourself. Wave. Say hello and be on your best behavior, because otherwise they will prove us wrong when we told them that you were not a security threat. So that will be happening, and that will be happening around the coffee break. The other thing we had yesterday, since we saw each other, was we had 3 workshops. And I'm told from the people in the workshops that we made them work hard, and a lot of information was exchanged. And sometimes I think the problem with these parallel workshops is that some of us would like to know what was going on in the other 2 while you were in the one you chose. So that's why we, the Finns, rather ingeniously came up with this idea this morning that each workshop will report back to you a little summary of their main findings so that we'll all be in the know. Somebody else was asking me about slides. Just want to tell you that I hope I'm not saying anything wrong, Rita, but we will be making the slides available to everybody later on. They will be distributed on the website, or they'll be available. Just the other thing I wanted to say to you is we do, of course, again, on the second day, we have our live audience because we're web streaming globally. So hello world. And also we are tweeting. You have the hashtags from yesterday. Please use Twitter if you have any comments or photos you'd like to share. Now, reporting back this morning from workshop 1, we were supposed to have Hanna Tolonen, but Hanna realized she had a double booking. And for some insane reason, she chose the other one instead of us. But we're very lucky because I think we have a marvelous substitute in Tiina Santonen from the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health. And Tiina is going to tell us all about what happened in workshop 1. Tiina.
So I'm giving you an overview of what we discussed yesterday afternoon in biomonitoring workshop. This workshop was organized together with a large EU biomonitoring initiative, HBM4EU. So, as many of you know, there is a lot of variability currently in between different member states how biomonitoring is applied in occupational health, and there might be some concerns related to use of biomonitoring, how the data is interpreted, how the data is used. Will it may it cause compromising employers' employment, or could some other analyses be made from the same samples? On the other hand, currently quite often biomonitoring is considered as a health surveillance tool, although it informs mainly on exposure. So it's not necessarily used effectively as a tool for exposure and exposure assessment and exposure management. On the other hand, we know the benefits of biomonitoring. In addition to those compounds which are very well absorbed through the skin, we saw examples how for example, in metal sector, in the case of many metals nowadays, hands-to-mouth exposure, for example, is very important route of exposure, and biomonitoring is only tool which can inform on that. So we learned about the HBM4EU project, which aims to respond to many questions, especially concerning the chemical exposure of European citizens, both general population and occupational exposure, and identify the possible sensitive subgroups, highly exposed subgroups, identify possible differences in exposure between European countries, and identify, in the case of different chemicals, what are the main exposure sources. Is the exposure to certain chemical mainly driven by environmental sources, diet, or so, or etc., or for example occupation, and then do a risk assessment, health impact assessment based on this information. And also consider a little bit mixed exposure contributing for certain diseases, including cancer. So how HBM4EU could help in protecting workers against occupational cancer. First of all, HBM4EU collects a lot of data on internal exposure levels, both from general population and workers, which allows a better comparison of background exposure data to occupational exposure data. HBM4EU creates also good practices for the use of biomonitor, and can provide practical guidance for the use of HBM in workplaces. It also investigates the links between chemical exposures and mixture health effects and different types of diseases, and also creates approaches for the derivation of biomonitoring guidance values. And it supports the knowledge on different exposure routes, which may help to improve protective measures for workplaces. If we consider the use of biomonitoring nowadays, it's not necessarily very regularly applied in the risk assessment in general, and also in occupational health. Although, according to our survey, many authorities responded that it is regularly applied. In many cases, it applies only to blood lead, for which we have binding biological limit value. In order to enhance the use of biomonitoring in occupational risk assessment, actually, what we need is a better regulatory recognition of biomonitoring, including also biomonitoring limit values. But this is not sufficient as alone. It also needs good practices. It needs supporting guidance for the use of biomonitoring, including also considerations of ethical and such kind of social issues and data protection issues. And there is also a need to clarify the role of biomonitoring as a tool supporting workplace exposure assessment and exposure management versus health surveillance tool. Okay, I think that was the main messages.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for sticking to the time. Next up, a report back from Workshop 2 from my colleague from EU-OSHA, Elke Schneider.
Thank you, Brenda. I will be reporting on the Workshop 2 on good practices and the views of the workplace level on workplace risk management and health monitoring. We started off our session with giving an insight into the activities that we'd carried out under the campaign. So we did a survey at EU-OSHA among our national focal points, asking which activities they had carried out and what their focus was. And it was a very diverse range of activities: inspection campaigns, developing guidance, developing training for workers, for labor inspectors. And as you can see on the slide, also the target groups and the sectors targeted and the substances that were in the focus of the campaign, a very diverse range. You can also identify some substances that have been a concern in the past and that are still a concern, like asbestos, for example. One of the issues that really caught our attention is that a lot of focus was given on young workers in construction, for example. And we got the message from our focal points that many young workers did not know about risks such as asbestos risks. After that, we did a quick roundup on the activities under the roadmap and on all the information that is available on the roadmap website. And as you can see, it's been up to now already quite a successful initiative with a lot of countries, a lot of member states subscribing to the roadmap. There's still some left that haven't, so we'd like to really stimulate them to join the roadmap, and many events and many practical solutions that were published on this website. And with my colleague Jos de Lang, who chaired this session with me, we also provided some information on resources that are available to these member states that might want to join the roadmap. We then had two presentations. The first one was on an Irish strategy for the construction sector. And as you can see, it was quite a broad focus of this campaign. So it was focused at working at height, at the duty holders, those who have to implement legislation at the workplaces, traffic management, but also other issues related to occupational health and hygiene. There's four key strategic areas. So it encompasses inspections, legal requirements, stakeholder communication, and also the development of advice, tools, and guidance. And here you can see some results of an inspection campaign. So to summarize this slide with a lot of information, it showed that many workplaces do comply with legislation and that there are quite a few measures in place. You can see the figure of 80% of the sites that do comply, but there is very little prevention in the true sense of the term, and that is having already hazards designed out, preventing hazards at the design stage. And we had one commended example in our Good Practice Award scheme that from an association that developed, for example, ready-made construction parts of buildings that would avoid cutting and other techniques that are dust producing. So there are lots of possibilities of avoiding these hazards already from the start. These campaigns, of course, are assessed, these strategies are assessed, and we got an insight into some of the indicators for assessing such a broad initiative. This is a 3-year strategy, and it will be assessed against many indicators. We also had some questions for our audience, and we asked them, what is actually needed to tackle exposure to carcinogens? And here are some of the results. So our colleagues from the Commission will be happy to see that legislation was on the top of the list, but also other issues like monitoring, campaigns, and the development of practical tools for the workplace level. The next presentation was on assessing exposure of Belgian workers to dangerous chemicals. When we look closer at this study, it was actually a lot of carcinogens, and this was carried out by means of sentinel surveillance. It was occupational physicians interviewing the workers that come regularly to see them for examinations about the real conditions at the workplaces. So what are the measures in place at the workplaces? And if we look at some of the results, we can see that a lot still remains to be done. There were hardly any collective prevention measures for many of the really important substances, and in some cases also no personal protective equipment. And if we look at some of the risk factors here, we have diesel engine emissions with more than half of the workers not covered by prevention measures. So we can see that still a lot remains to be done. The second on the list is wood dust, and then comes respirable crystalline silica. So it's really a matter of implementation at the workplace level. This is a very special study because it's carried out by occupational physicians. They are the experts. In contrary to other surveys where you need to train those who interview workers, in this case it's already experts interviewing the workers. One of the drawbacks of this is that it adds to the workload of these occupational physicians, and we know that there's less and less occupational physicians, and that also the knowledge about the level of exposure is limited. So in many cases there were no measurements available and so on. But the value of such a study is that it seems costly, but it's not so costly if we look at other tools, and it could be implemented in quite a few other countries too, to get an idea of what the situation at the workplaces is. After this last presentation, we asked our audience, are occupational physicians involved in some of the research in your countries? And actually quite a few said yes. So it would be interesting to see how they are involved and what they are working on. We also asked again the audience how they would spend 100 million euro to gain the maximum impact on prevention of risks from carcinogens. And here we can see a bit of a contradictory result compared to the first question that we asked. They would invest in campaigns, more inspection, which ranked rather low in the first question, and then training, instruction, development of interventions, and also tools, guidance, and so on. Our last question to the audience was, what is the message you would send to someone who works with carcinogenic substances? And we got a broad range of answers like protect yourself, retire, Be strong. You have only one life, but also find information and ask inspection services, ask preventive services, look at the risks before you start working with them. And I'd like to conclude with this slide.
Thank you very much, Elke. Thank you for sticking to the time. And now, presenting the outcomes of the third workshop, I'd like to ask Gertrud Breindl from Austria. Thank you, Gertrud.
Thank you, Brenda. And I see I have 1 minute for my presentation.
No, we started late, so you have 5 minutes, just like everybody else.
Okay, thank you. That makes it easier for me, but I try to shorten my presentation a little bit. The aim of our workshop 3 was to find out ideas for strengthening and collaboration between OSH and REACH and take advantage from both systems. So we had a positive approach, or tried to have a positive approach. And we had 4 presentations in our workshop covering, so to say, the most important views on different levels. We had the Commission, we had the social partners, gender balanced from worker side and employer side, and we had also the practice on board, Dr. O'Sullivan, who is inspector. I now try to present the key points from the Commission pointed out. Miriam Gutierrez Medina from DG GROW referred to the second REACH review where action points were issued. One action point on REACH-OSH interface, on safety data sheets as well, and the coordination of national enforcement authorities. And her main conclusions were for the future that challenges on communication of safe use of chemicals in the supply chain will be tackled on a holistic approach. The enforcement interactions could be tackled at national level by follow-up the recommendation of the Forum Working Group. I didn't know what the Forum Working Group is, but it seems to be a special working group under REACH, especially working on enhancement of coordination of national enforcement authorities. Miriam also pointed out that having a common source for scientific advice under REACH and OSH will ensure coherence and transparency, and that ECHA will continue playing a key role in implementation of the 2 sets of EU legislation ensuring workers' protections to chemicals. That was the view of the Commission, DG GROW. We then had a presentation from Isabel Meyer-Rubio from the employer side, but she's also a member of the working group chemicals of the advisory committee. So she really knew what she was speaking about. And on one hand, she asked how can REACH support OSH at company level, and of course information is available, safety data sheets and info cards, but this information might be too complex for non-technical users. And exposure scenarios are general, and best practice would help SMEs. Limit values are easily found OLs as well as DNLs and DMLs, but they can also cause confusion on non-expert level. The second part of our presentation was how can REACH and OSH support one another on regulatory level? A key issue in my opinion. It was seen as a complementary legislation. REACH is the entry door to the markets, and OSH regulates the workplace, including chemicals not put into the market, and of course, we have to address overlaps and gaps, coordinate strategies and plans, and that was a discussion point in our working group as well. Toni Musu, well known from the employer side, ETUC, also member of the working group chemicals of the advisory committee, sees OELs as a useful tool to reduce exposure, but not as effective as substitution, of course. Then a hot potato. An existing indicative or binding OEL is not a reason to request exemption from authorization under REACH. We know that's not the end of the discussion. There are other views, but that, of course, is the view of ETUC. But again, synergies between REACH and OSH needs to be developed further. We need a public policy against work-related cancer. Of course, toxic for reproduction chemicals were a topic for the worker side, and endocrine disruptors. Gender is always raised by ETUI, especially regarding cytotoxic drugs and nurses. And overall, of course, industry need to be convinced that the only way forward is safer chemicals and products containing them. That was, in short, the workers' view. And then we had Dr. Thomas Sullivan, who is inspecting in Ireland everything regarding chemicals. REACH, OSH, Seveso, so he's a real expert in practical issues. And his views are that he presented case studies which really caused burning questions in our working group. And he said REACH has positive influence on the communication on the supply chain, of course. And that's of benefit for OSH, of safety data sheets should assist the risk assessment, OSH risk assessment, but the quality of safety data sheets is an issue. Also in practice, REACH authorization obligations support OSH by elimination and substitution, and binding occupational limit values are important to ensure the protections of workers. So it's both, so to say. And one important thing, what Tom also mentioned, was that the obligation to notify facilitates, under REACH, facilitates the identification of users, and that makes it easier for inspectors to inspect the companies who use carcinogens. In our discussion, we had, again, a positive approach. And the common sense was REACH and OSH legislation are complementary. Compliance under REACH brings benefits under OSH, and of course vice versa. And how can we avoid setting overlapping legislation? What kind of actions should be taken? And how could the process be more transparent? And there we had a few important is to enhance communication and coordination between the DGs inside the European Commission with a common strategy and common plans. That was it in short. Thank you.
Well done, Gertrud. Thank you very much for keeping the time. I appreciate that. Well, yesterday we heard quite a lot from different governments, from the social partners, from actors, from the European Commission. And now I suppose it is worth asking oneself the question, what about the role of the agencies? And to tell us about the work being done, first of all, in the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work, I'd like to invite Christa Sedlatschek to come to the podium. Christa was appointed Executive Director of EU-OSHA in 2011. Her background is in occupational health. She's a medical doctor. She began her career in Austria, working in the Inspectorate and in the ministry. Subsequently, she was in Bilbao for a while as a head of unit, and then she worked in Germany for INQA with Bauer. And now since, as I said, 2011, she's director of the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work, and she's going to tell us a little bit about our campaigning work in Bilbao and also the worker exposure survey. Christa.
Thank you very much, Brenda. First of all, before I start my presentation, I would like to congratulate and thank the Finnish presidency once again for the organization of this excellent event. Very important topic, but also for the organization of the dinner yesterday, and I will never forget this wonderful music and the musician, because also it reminded me of the zither used in the Austrian folk music. But of course it's a bit more simple, but really great. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to, as Brenda said, I would like to give you a bit of an overview what happened in the Healthy Workplace campaign 2018-19. You know, we are 65 people in the agency in Bilbao, so our success of all our Healthy Workplaces campaign is based on our, of course, coordination of networks, of coordination of all our stakeholders, because otherwise I think we wouldn't succeed in more than 28 countries, and also participating not only member states but Norway, very active, Iceland, Switzerland, and this is all supported by our excellent national focal points, by the official campaign partner, European social partners, media partners, Enterprise Europe network, other EU institutions, other EU agencies. We will get an inside view on the cooperation in the next speech. So this was organized and coordinated by us, but I have to say the activities and really the efforts put into the organization of activities was great in all countries. Now, a reminder what were agreed strategic objectives. What we have done during these 2 years and aiming at was to raise awareness of the importance and relevance of managing dangerous substances. I think that was important, especially for micro and small enterprises, promoting risk assessment, the basic tools for assessing risk in companies, and again, strong focus on micro and small enterprises, enterprises, raising awareness of risk linked to exposure to carcinogens at work by supporting the exchange of good practice. And therefore, we are so thankful for the roadmap on carcinogens, because that was a platform where we could also exchange good practices. Then targeting groups of workers with specific needs, like young workers. Elke also mentioned it, young workers, but also gender-related, and improving awareness of policy developments and legislation, of course, also to improve compliance in the countries. We did a lot, I think, and we published really many campaign resources. We produced a campaign guide, practical e-tool. This was for the first time related to dangerous substances, and it was so successful that we will do it also for the next Healthy Workplace campaign on musculoskeletal disorders. Several reports, series of info sheets on priority topics, then the database of resources and tools, case studies also for the exchange of good practice. We updated the OSHA wiki training for substitution materials. This was also very successful, and we will follow up together with the NIVA Institute in 2020 to provide training, and our famous NAPO films, of course. We translated again all our promotional material into 24 languages. In addition, also Norway translated most of the material. So what we were able to do is to fill in the database of resources from member states, 238 reports. Then we have now in the database resources from EU and international level, more than 200. Also, the number of visual resources increased to 240, and case studies are partly already published, partly on the way, in total 23. And I would like to come back to the e-tool, as it is unique, and I have to say very, very well appreciated by our partners and also by the, so to say, clients. This was done for the first time. We published it in 2018. That was the EU master version in English, but we also asked, that's our portfolio approach, we asked also countries, would you like to have it in your language? And really many countries followed. It was Austria, Estonia, Romania, Slovenia, Norway, and ongoing the development is for Iceland and Portugal, and I think also for Germany. So that was the e-tool. And the e-tool was, there are two parts. The one left hand with very short questionnaires, 7 questions, rather for micro and small enterprises, and the long version for rather the ones who wanted to take more time, or the bigger companies. And as I said, we will also use the training tool for seminar 2020 in Helsinki to train people. Then we updated existing material. You know, we already, we had in our website and the database a lot of stuff related to dangerous substances, also stemming from our former Healthy Workplace campaign on dangerous substances. So we updated database, info sheets, and also OSHA wiki. Then these are the latest info sheets. That's Carcinogens at Work info sheet, including important information related to the risk assessment, the hierarchy of prevention, then exposure limits. I think that's important to get the idea or information on what does it mean and how this is dealt with. Also in the aspect of legislative measures. Then maintenance and incidents, emergency plans related to dangerous substances, the consultation of workers, participation of workers in planning, implementation, and evaluation of measures, health surveillance, then also including the roadmap on carcinogens, and then we presented examples of guidance and information materials. That's carcinogens at work, and then mentioned already vulnerable workers and dangerous substances like young workers, gender aspects for women, men, then service occupations like, for example, the healthcare sector, where we see high risk exposure to not only dangerous substances, and migrant workers. And there you can see now already the quantitative feedback of our success, because we were able to increase 70% in our activities compared to the previous years. So that's great, I have to say. And also we, and this was organized by the country and organized also by us at EU level, 220 activities, as I said, in more than 28 countries. We distributed 250,000 campaign branded items, 950,000 publications in 25 languages. Then we had in events, in seminars, 71 campaign banner stands and 24 exhibition kits. So I think that's also thanks to the network, thanks to our partners at national level. I had the pleasure to participate in several of these events. There was a really great participation, very active, and therefore we see really that was the most successful campaign ever. So this is also a bit mirroring the success. Here the upper graph shows the comparison. Light blue is the former one, dark blue is the dangerous substances. You see the peaks of the visits on the website. That's quite typical. After the launch of the campaign, we see the peak because we are also presenting at that time more material, or for the first time the material and publications. And then it's the European week, it's the peak, but it's, you see, more than ever compared also to the former campaign. And the other graph shows the average visitors at our website. Left hand, there we see 60% more left hand the unique visitors on our website, and right hand it's the total number of visits, but also an increase of 67%. Then, one of my favorites, I have to admit, the Good Practice Award and the ceremony. I think in almost all countries, not in all countries, there were not national Good Practice Awards. And then we had a selection committee, and then there we had, I think, 6 awarded and 4 commended examples. For all of you who participated in the summit 2 weeks ago, it was a great success. And for me, the greatest success is that micro and small enterprises participated. You remember the ones who were there, the hairdressers of Spain, and I think that's really great to see that a hairdresser with three employees put a lot of efforts in changing their cleaning material, the color for the hair, etc. So it didn't cost a lot. This is the example. It didn't cost a lot, but they took it seriously. I think it's great. And right hand, you see the areas where these companies are working and putting efforts to substitute or to take measures related to the risk of dangerous substances. Then I only mention it because Björn will also tell a bit more about it, but we had, and I think this is the nature of our agencies, the topic is dangerous substances, so we had a cooperation with ECHA. I have to say I was really surprised when I saw this slide, which was prepared, I think Elke did it, so many cooperation. We had the consultation on the OSH Wiki articles, also related to REACH and CLP, of course. Then we had co-promotional activities. I know that my colleagues had telephone conferences, so a regular exchange of information. Then also cooperation with the substitution network. We had several meetings in Bilbao. Then ECHA was also involved in the e-tools workshop. The Healthy Workplaces campaign promoted through the ECHA website. When you go to the website, you can see there is, you see promotion of our Healthy Workplace campaign. Then presentations to the ECHA stakeholder groups. And we had, where I participated too, the visit of one colleague from ECHA and video conference with colleagues of ECHA. And I think it was, again, the aim to, let's say, to stabilize the cooperation with ECHA. And we had, I think, really good ideas how we could proceed. But it was not only ECHA. We had also, you remember, in the summit, the European Environment Agency. Of course, there are also overlapping areas on dangerous substances. And this, of course, is important for us to cooperate with agencies where we have a common interest, of course. Then the Healthy Workplace Summit, I told it, sometimes you have to celebrate. I think we did it. It was a quite nice event in Euskalduna, the conference, and then in the Maritime Museum was a networking event. And I only would like to say that we have already started for the preparation of the next campaign on musculoskeletal disorders. And you know, this time it will take 3 years until we meet again for the summit, hopefully in Bilbao. Then I will mention the roadmap, but Elke did it already, and I think it's high on our agenda yesterday and today. I think it was an excellent initiative from the Netherlands presidency, and also it was great to get on board the following presidencies, and there were several events. It was the in 2017, but also this year the A&E, it was a topic. The ICO conference in Singapore, then Austrian presidency, also the presidency conference on the topic. Then in our Healthy Workplace Summit, it was mentioned, and the presentation what happened during these years. Now the Finnish presidency, and this is today, yesterday and today. And we had many focal points who organized activities, seminars, workshops, also in cooperation with companies. And as I said, this is let's say the quantitative evaluation of the Healthy Workplace campaign. We will start, like always, also our routine evaluation of all Healthy Workplace campaign, where we get also feedback, of course, of the qualitative criteria. So now I would like to look a bit into the future, because in agreement with the Commission and our Management Board, we have, or we will start the worker exposure survey. Many of you already have heard about the exposure survey. Was not easy discussion with our Management Board after, I think, 2 Management Board meetings. There was an agreement. We will start, at least as a trial phase. And what was the background? Why should we do this? There's a need for harmonized and comparable data on exposure to carcinogen. Then we knew already since several years that there is an existing and successful and unique survey and methodology in Australia. Then a feasibility study on a survey and exposure to cancer risk clearly indicated it will be a unique survey also in Europe. And these results and recommendations of the feasibility study were discussed with the management board, and I think there is consensus. What do we need? What do we want? The feasibility of running a robust and exposure survey. So a robust exposure survey, that's the aim. The value of the anticipated results in terms of their reliability was an agreement. This will hopefully take place. Also agreement to the extent to which such results would meet a widely identified need and the absence of viable alternative to meeting these needs. So that's unique in Europe. And the first phase of the survey in our work program starts in 2020. The fieldwork will then carried out 21-22. That means first results 22, end of 22, but I would rather say beginning of 23. So now going to the survey methodology and the main features. It is a telephone survey with workers, a standardized questionnaire with modules customized for a broad variety of jobs, and there we have at least identified more than 50, that's according also to the Australian one. Short, precise and factual customized question about task. I mean, this is not only related to this survey, but of course the experience of service in general. Our ECHA survey is clear. The people have to understand the questions, and of course then the interviewers have to be very clear. People doing this have to be trained. Possible exposure to 46 cancer risk factors, but going even beyond substances, for example, radiation like UV, and I think night shift not yet agreed, Elke. Or at least under discussion, I think. Then probability of exposure assessed by experts. That means, of course, we need experts also supporting the process and being available for assessment. And using this OC ideas tool, this is the Australian tool. Possible multiple exposure situations for a person. I think this is important, and this is the unique outcome. And a large number of risk factors covered, not only cancer risk factors. So the combination of a variety of risk factors at workplace level. This is how the Australian module looks like, but this is also how we will develop this survey. The first instance is ask worker what task he or she does. Secondly, this is a computer-based automated procedure, rules based on literature and expertise, based on algorithm, and then exposure assess whether exposed to agent. That means in cases where there is a doubt or no experience, or the automated process result is not satisfying, then the experts will interfere. So that is also like the Australian is doing. We are in contact, of course, with the Australians. They visited several, participated in our workshops, and of course we will have also a steering group of experts in Europe. The potential information from the survey results: cancer risk factors responsible for most of the exposure, exposure circumstances most prevalent in Europe, overall number of workers exposed to each cancer risk factor. So it's an exposure estimate and to several cancer risk factors. as I said, multiple exposures and characteristics of workers exposed to cancer risk factors. We will hopefully achieve better identification of risk factors by that way, better targeted awareness raising about exposure to cancer, prioritization of sectors, occupations, tasks, and cancer risk factors for prevention, better design and targeting of preventive measures, and of hopefully contribution to evidence base for policy. Of course, I mean, these are the wonderful and positive aspects, but we have to see, of course, the main challenges and the limitations. The key challenges is and this was also discussed in the workshops, adaptation of the questionnaire modules to Europe. There is a strong Australian slang, but of course, with experience with surveys is that you really have to be very precise and use the terms used at workplace level. Then identification of relevant differences between countries, not only between Australia and Europe, but also in Europe between the countries. Then we need, let's say, occupational hygiene experts to assess and validate the questionnaire and rules of national level. I think this will be also a key aspect to achieve what we agreed beforehand. Need also for our adaptation to the national language. I mentioned it already. Some questions on agents, materials, or prevention measures may overstrain the knowledge of unskilled workers, leading to also measurement errors. And this is what I said, what we learned, lessons learned from other surveys, to be very precise, and also the interviewers have to be trained in that way. And also a need to, this was already identified, a need for a specific expert subgroup on manufacturing, because Australia has a very low percentage of manufacturing. Of course, the industry is a bit differently organized in comparison to Europe, but this is the need for adaptation. In Australia, I think only 5 to 6% manufacturing. It's much higher in Europe. So these are the challenges, but I'm convinced we will achieve together with the experts, with our stakeholders. And as I said, this is really unique, and I see a real need to do so. So that was the view to the future, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christa. Thank you. And now we're taking advantage of the fact that we're all here in Helsinki to welcome the Executive Director of ECHA, the European Chemicals Agency, Björn Hansen. Björn has been the Executive Director of that agency since the beginning of 2018. And before that, he's had a distinguished career, both in the European Commission, in the chemicals unit of DG Environment, also in the European Chemicals Bureau, and also extensive international experience, chairing many important working groups in the OECD and in the United Nations. The good thing for us is that Björn has been involved in the development of REACH and CLP since the very early days. So that's a great advantage for us today. And Christa already mentioned the collaboration that goes on between his agency and many other units of the Commission and many other agencies in Europe. One last thing to add about Björn. Have you ever woken up in the morning with a question in your mind? You thought, I've been dreaming all night about probability theory. Well, and if you have a problem, a puzzle, there's something about probability theory that you need to discuss with somebody. Well, Björn is an expert in probability theory. what's the likelihood of that? So the great thing is that afterwards, in the coffee break, if you want to talk to him about that or any of the other issues he touches, he is our man today. Björn Hansen, thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Yeah, probability theory was a different life. It's over 30 years ago. So I just remember some of the terms of Banach spaces, Hilbert spaces, and self-decomposable distributions from my thesis and postdoc work. But I'll get into chemicals immediately. I'm not going to outline the cooperation with EU-OSHA. Christa has done that beautifully, but fully supported from our side. And I think, indeed, we have a very good collaboration, and we have clearly complementary mandates, and I think that that's a strength that we can elaborate, build on, and extort even more than we are today. ECHA is a European Chemicals Agency. We're situated about 1 kilometer. I was trying to figure out which direction, but down the road from here up until end of the year. After that, it's 2 kilometers down the road. For Helsinki, that means we're moving from the center to the periphery. We're 650 people specialized in safe use of chemicals. Just to give you an idea of our work, we have on average meetings with 50 people a day in the agency on the safe use of chemicals. Our competences is data management. This means development of complex IT systems that are used by thousands of companies and authorities and people around us, and working with complex data in order to extract, prioritize, and understand the chemical universe. We have a competence on chemical assessment. This is basically hazard and risk assessment, chemicals management, meaning risk management, and finally on what I call impact analysis. I'm trying to avoid using commission speak, and this is to basically cover the areas of analysis of alternatives, so alternative techniques to hazardous substances, and the impacts of risk management decisions. My talk is basically having one message, and it's linked very nicely to the outcome of the REACH-OSH workshop yesterday. The message is let's stop talking about REACH versus OSH as if there's a conflict. Let's stop talking about REACH or OSH as if they are alternative approaches, but start talking about REACH and OSH, because the two together are designed to be so complementary and synergistic that it's only an issue of coordination, and may I dare say not only in the Commission, because there I think I talk regularly with all the DGs work involved in chemicals, and I know they talk, but it's also an issue of coordination in member states, competent authorities for the legislation, inspectors for REACH and OSH talking, working together, or even being the same person, like in Ireland. And, if I dare say even further, companies very often have their REACH safety people, and then they have their OSH safety people, and they don't talk together either. So it's talking together, one, and the second is the borderline between REACH and OSH. It exists legislatively, but we need to work out clearly what it means practically. Those two things solved, we can, let's say, get out all the synergies that exist in my 650 people and Christa's 65 people, plus all the regulatory people working in the member states on REACH and OSH. So, basically, I'll take you through what we do in ECHA, focus not so much on the interfaces, but basically what competences, what information, what knowledge we got that could be of advantage to you, if you so want, and give you a couple of hints of where I think maybe we could help out if we work better together. Basically, the construct of REACH and classification and labeling is one where REACH generates data, for example, on mutagenicity, carcinogenicity, reproductive toxicity. So mutagenicity, carcinogenicity are the important things for the topic of this workshop. Classification and labeling classifies according to the globally harmonized system chemicals into basically being carcinogens or not. And OSH uses this data to do the employer risk assessments. Fits beautifully together. Now, how do we work in ECHA on this? Some very quick slides. I'm going to only take you through the titles. Look at them more in detail if you so wish, and ask any questions to my colleagues through an email afterwards if you so want. We have what's called an integrated regulatory strategy. What this basically means is that we take all the chemicals we got information on and we regularly screen them. And this is thousands of chemicals that we look at. And we bin them in substances that need further data, REACH can generate it, and substances that don't need further data, and we can conclude either they're of low concern or high concern. That's what we do regularly. This here are the numbers of what we've done concerning carcinogens. Basically, there are about 400 carcinogens which are known carcinogens, meaning that they have been harmonized classified as category 1A, 1B, or 2 carcinogens in Europe that are on the market, meaning actually that are manufactured or imported. So REACH doesn't mean marketed, it means they're just from manufacture or import onward. There are about 1,200 of those substances classified in CLP, so that means that 800 of these carcinogens which have been identified either were never used in Europe, doubt it, or are no longer used in Europe, meaning they've been substituted. Big success, I think, of our combined work over the years. Of the 400 registered substances, we've screened all of them, we've binned them all, I'll show you that later, and in the end, 83 of them have been identified as so-called substances of very high concern, meaning that they can run into the REACH authorization process, and 28 of them are already undergone or have already finished the authorization procedure. Another element of our screening exercise is that we look at what we call the chemicals universe. I know that was mentioned in the workshop on REACH, which in this case, this slide just shows the above 100 tons in Europe. And we've already, at the status of this summer, binned them in 2,683 substances we still need to look at. There's 1,104 substances which are undergoing data generation today or have just finished doing that. We then have 219 undergoing or have already finished regulatory risk management. And then we have the numbers down in the light and dark green are numbers representing substances we've looked at and think they're of low concern, or there's no need for additional action, meaning that they seem to be pretty well regulated at EU level and therefore needs no intervention. This is May 2018. By the end of 2020, we hope that it looks more like this, meaning that in particular the brown ball will get very small, and we therefore know by the end of next year for most substances on the European market above 100 tons, more or less, if they need further data, need risk management or don't need risk management. We do all this now in groups. We've totally reorganized the agency, so everything we look at groups. This is one of the handicaps of the previous interface, OSH REACH, but hopefully this is going to help a lot in the future. So we never look at a substance alone, we always look at it together with chemically similar substances. Our contribution to occupational exposure limit values, you all know, but let me just run through it very quickly. DG Employment decides what substances they want us to do something on, of course, consulting everybody here, consulting us, consulting other services. We are then asked to develop the scientific basis for an OEL. Our risk assessment committee, which includes a lot of experts that used to be in the scientific committee for occupation exposure limit values, come up with an opinion, and we hand it over to Charlotte, Stefan, and our colleagues in DG Employment for further processing. So basically, in short, here you have the 7 steps of the process. Science is 1 and 2. From 3 onwards is the Brussels work with the Working Party on Chemicals. We are fitting into the first 2 steps, where what we do is we get the request, We call for evidence, public call for evidence. We develop a scientific report. We ask for a public consultation on that scientific report, and then our risk assessment committee goes out and makes a development. When I say our and the scientific report, it's the actual staff of the Secretariat in ECHA, the 650 people who developed that scientific report, and it's the independent experts in the RAC who develop an opinion on it, and full public consultation. And then we give it to the Commission, we help them out understand what we write, if they had any questions, and that moves through the legislative decision process. Our timelines is about 12 to 24 months. This depends a little bit on our negotiations on how urgent the substances are for DG employment, but also our own workload and how to pace it. But generally between 12 and 24 months from we get the letter signed from DG employment to start the work until we've handed over the opinion, somewhere between 12 and 24 months. Here's the list of the substances you already know. We've done 5 basically as a pilot phase. We're now doing 2 more structurally based on a service level agreement, and we have 2 more in the pipeline for 2020, and I expect that this is going to start increasing given the political priority on health, safety, and such topics, and the particular mentioning of carcinogens and cancer in now President van der Leyen's political guidelines. REACH authorization restrictions, also 2 instruments which could easily fit beautifully together with OSH work, don't always do it, and it's because of the 2 issues, I believe, that I mentioned before. Basically, REACH authorization implements OSH substitution, so it puts a bit of additional pressure on substitution that already comes from OSH. In particular for mutagens, reproductive toxogens, carcinogens, again. And it's done through the obligation on companies to put on paper what they've done to substitute. This is called an analysis of alternatives. And then we have REACH restrictions which set timelines for substitution there where workers are at risk. Now, 2 examples, just pulling out what I see. This is just exemplifications, a little bit random, of what the advantages of the 2 systems are. One was in chromium-6, we were extremely excited about seeing how much innovation there is in the chromium-6 manufacture or use, both in substituting chromium-6, but also in adapting production or use processes to safer use of chromium-6. And here's one example called rotohybrid, which was developed and we believe was quicker developed thanks to the REACH authorization. And then there's a infamous or famous, depending on how cynical you are, on dichlorobenzene. I say this because this is a substance that I saw for the first time 15 years ago, which shows how a restriction can help workers. Another area which I think links nicely is we have an OEL adopted on chromium, and through the authorization process on chromium, we had many interactions with companies and them among themselves on sharing good practice at a very technical level. And ultimately, the conclusion was that most companies, if not all, could meet the OEL, no problem, and were even challenged themselves and committed to meeting a limit value 5 times lower than the OEL. And I think that shows exactly how the instruments can work well together. Again, there were frictions, we got to analyze those and get rid of them, but if we focus on the positive, this is a super result for us all. Supply chain. Basically, REACH requires all sorts of work to be done, and a lot of that work results in data, classification, labeling, safe instructions, and what we call exposure scenarios. And all of that gets stuffed down the supply chain with immense speed and immense volume and immense content of information via the safety data sheet. And then there's an expectation that OSH picks it up. We know that that's not working so well. But you should know that we in ECHA, for example, we spend 8 people full-time on standardizing this communication, developing IT tools, and working on getting that information down to the companies, and what we need to do is to get you guys to tell us how we need to change our work in order to make that information more useful. Basically, we see safe use of chemicals overall as being on 3 pillars: knowledge, evidently, regulatory action, which is actually only a minor bit, and then comes the communication in the supply chain, which is the real risk management, the stuff that happens before authorities kick in. And that's why we think that this communication in the supply chain is extremely important, and why we would really welcome discussions. First of all, those companies who have a REACH guy who knows this and an OSH guy who doesn't, get those people to talk together and find out what they want, and then come to us and tell us how to change our systems so that the REACH information can be put to better use downstream. So basically, we think that we can develop our systems and want to develop our systems so it can better be used by OSH. We are working with the Commission, and I know the Commission internally works very well together because we're on so many teleconferences where employment, grow, and environment are all present, on looking at how to improve the legislative framing of the risk management measures being communicated down the supply chain, and then making it easier and better for you to use. And then finally, we're working hard on digitalization. Like I said before, we're an agency which basically works with tens of thousands of companies, and therefore everything we do is digital. No paper is asked from any company at any time, and therefore we want to use that capacity and the fact that we already have structured information from A till Z in a way that that also can be pushed down the supply chain a lot more efficiently to companies. As an example, we have 80 people working on IT in the agency, and this is not because we love IT, it's because without IT, we need about 6,000 people to do the work rather than the 600. So basically, that shows how IT and digital we are. And this can be of a big advantage to the OSH community if we manage to align the information we got with the information you need. With that, I'd like to say thank you, and hopefully there's a little bit of time for a question or answer.
Thank you. Well, actually there isn't, but seeing as though you asked so nicely, does anybody have one or two? We'll take 2 quick questions if anybody has anything burning to ask. Must be related to carcinogens and dangerous substances and chemicals now. Nothing about probability theory.
No thanks. Not that. The last paper was 1992, so.
Yeah, but it's in your CV. It's in your CV. So,
okay.
Right. Well, listen, you can also use the opportunity to have a chat with Björn during the coffee break. So thank you very much, Björn. Thank you. Thank you. So now, only slightly over time, I'd like to say that the Covenant pre-signing meeting will happen now in room 13, is that correct? Room 13. For the rest of you, it's time for coffee, and we'll be back here promptly at 5 minutes to 11. 5 minutes to 11. And if you see the Prime Minister, say hello politely. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your punctuality. So, welcome back, and thank you for your punctuality. It's much appreciated. Now, on the programme, we were meant right now to have a presentation on the Austrian perspective. The work that they've been doing on the elimination of carcinogens in the workplace. And this presentation was going to be by Katrin Arthaber. Unfortunately, she's been not been able to make it to Helsinki. But fortunately, we have someone who will deliver her presentation for Katrin, and that is, once again, Gertrud Breindl. Thank you, Gertrud.
Thank you, Brenda. Sometimes a person needs to have more faces than one face, and I try to present Katrin's speech. I'm afraid I can't please you with the same level of energy like Björn did, but hopefully you receive some useful information from my side. We had an Austrian focus campaign on carcinogens from the middle of 2017 to the middle of 2019, and I have 2 or 3 key messages for you, and this is already the first key message of my presentation. This was not a focus campaign alone of the Austrian Labour Inspection, but together with the Austrian Workers' Compensation Board, and that really was an added value. We wouldn't have that much impact alone. So one of our main message is working together brings good results, better results than only working alone. And of course, our focus campaign was in a European context. On one side, we had the roadmap on carcinogens, and on the other side, the European campaign led by EU-OSHA on dangerous substances. Okay, we saw it together with the Austrian Workers' Compensation Board that we will not have easy and quick results from our focus campaign. We will not reduce cancer quickly with this campaign, occupational cancer, but we hoped to spread awareness and knowledge, and that's what our main task was. The Austrian Labour Inspection visited, or inspected at least, 600 enterprises, and the Austrian Workers' Compensation Board consulted 1,000 enterprises in these 2 years. And we saw that 2 years are too short for this sort of campaign. The Austrian Compensation Board extended the campaign to 2020, and the Austrian Labour Inspection will have a special inspection campaign on silica dust in 2020. So focus on a special carcinogen. What did we do? We had 2 waves in the inspection campaign. The first wave was to inspect 300 companies twice, and these companies were selected based on the data we had because of health surveillance of the employers. So in the first wave, we inspected companies, enterprises which should know that they are using carcinogens because their employees are under health surveillance because of exposure to carcinogens. And as I said, we visited these enterprises twice. First, inspecting and for information, and a second time, not all of them, but 20% of them, to have a closer look at the progress of the prevention measures. And which branches were No? Yeah, there. These enterprises were mostly welders and metal workers, and the Austrian Workers' Compensation Board, they were concentrating on several sectors and spreaded information. Okay. The second wave of our inspections, there we selected enterprises which probably didn't know that they are using carcinogens at work, because we didn't count on the data of health surveillance, but we used certain, we choose certain branches. But the way we inspected was rather the same. We used nearly the same questionnaire, and special trained inspectors visited also in the second wave the enterprises. Which enterprises did we visit in the second phase? Hospitals and veterinarians. They are using, of course, carcinogens at work. Loading, there we had diesel motor exhausts. Laundries, swimming pool welders, and chimney refurbishers. That were the main branches, sectors we inspected in this second wave, not based on data of health surveillance. Yes, I already said it was a 2 years inspection campaign, but it was clear that we will need more time. 2 years are too short for this issue. What was important, we learned, was to raise awareness. It's only the first step, but an important step. I will show you afterwards. And we also know that so-called new carcinogens, at least new for being enclosed in the EU Carcinogens Directive, like silica dust, need a special attention. So that was the main reasons why we decided in the labor inspection to have a special focus campaign on silica in 2020. Okay, but what were the results? From the Austrian Workers' Compensation Board, they produced a lot of information material for several sectors, also video clips on a rather user-friendly and easy understanding level, which is necessary for our enterprises, because I think, like in every EU member state, our 97% of our enterprises are not even medium-sized enterprises, but small enterprises and micro-enterprises. So we now have a good set of information material, of easy accessible information material, also from the labor inspection. But what was the outcome of our inspections? And that's my second main message for you. At the left side, there's a misunderstanding. Left side is the first wave we had. You can remember those enterprises that should know that they use carcinogens because they have health surveillance for their workers. And on the right side, the result of the second wave, hospitals, etc., etc. Both sort of enterprises had approximately 50% that kept the OALs, that were in line with the legal obligatories when it comes to the OALs. Our worry was not so much on those companies, those enterprises where the OALs were exceeded. Of course, there were 10% and 3% were of the enterprises in the different waves where the OAL was not kept, was exceeded. Our concern are those enterprises where, on one hand, they don't know if how high the exposure is, and much more concern we have on those enterprises who use carcinogens at work, but they are not aware of it. And we want to concentrate on those who use carcinogens but are not aware that they are using it, because not knowing means you don't set any prevention measure. As you know, we have the legal obligation to, in the hierarchy of prevention measures, we have the legal obligation to reduce the number exposed. But our experience was that not so many enterprises know how many employees are exposed. So if you don't know, you can't reduce the number of workers exposed, of course. On the right hand, you have the percentage of enterprises that didn't know the number of exposed employees during the first wave. First wave, those enterprises who knew that they use carcinogens. They seem to know how many workers are exposed. On the very left, and that was astonishing, you have the hospital sector. Nearly 20% of the hospitals didn't know how many workers are exposed to carcinogens. And what we experienced is that in larger enterprises, and normally hospitals are larger enterprises, it differs from department to department. It's often the manager of the department who is responsible for the culture, for the OSH culture in this department. And if you don't have a top-down approach in the department, awareness will not be there. So you can't say in a simple way, our problems are small enterprises because they don't have information, they have less knowledge. Of course, that's often the case, but also large enterprises, you have a certain, you don't have to lose them. But we also had very positive results. A big part of the deficiencies could be solved in a few weeks. As you remember, we were visiting most of the enterprises twice, and infringements and breaches were solved rather quick, and many measures can be tackled with limited investment. If employers, managers are aware of the problem. And what we also, but that's not a new information, but we experienced really that good examples are welcomed in the companies, in the enterprises, especially good practices on substitution. That helps really. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gertrud. Could I ask the participants of the round table, the panel, to come up now quickly, please? That would be great. We have Heidi Bussen from the Netherlands. We have Raimo, of course, our host here from Finland, wherever you wish. Free seating, free seating. Gertrud Breindl from Austria. Per Hilmerson, wherever you wish to sit.
Doesn't matter where we sit.
No, it's fine. It's free seating. There's no hierarchy. Yeah.
It's your table?
No. I'm standing.
You're standing, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Are we all comfortable there? Yeah, we all okay? You have microphones beside you that you can use as well. Now, I've noticed that this morning the audience didn't really get much time to have their say. So we're going to keep the opening statements short and sweet. And then we're going to throw it open. We have some questions we'd already like to start with. But if anybody from the audience would join in, just put your hand up and we'll try and include you. So I think just as an opening, would you like to say something, Heidi, to say something to us, given that the whole initiative for the roadmap came from the Netherlands?
Of course. As was said yesterday beautifully by you, it's the brainchild of the Dutch presidency. And I'm very proud to see that our child is developing so well in the three past years, thanks to all the loving mothers and fathers, I think, and that they are sitting around here. And to the roadmap partners, and also, of course, the Austrian and the Finnish presidency. Thank you for that, and keeping the roadmap getting further. I just witnessed the pre-signing, and I'm now sure that it will go to Germany. So I'm very glad of that. Also, compliments to the colleague of Finland for the beautiful conference here, and to be among friends, as you said yesterday. Since our labor market is an international market, we have workers from all over Europe and also beyond that. It is necessary to keep it on the agenda. Because the consequences of the exposure are often not visible immediately. So raising awareness stays key. And I have a background in communication, and as a communication expert, you know that the strength is repeating the message all over and over again. So I think we have to keep on doing that if we want to shift the minds and the working conditions in Europe. So I want to say that we can't stop at setting exposure limits, but also it's good that the roadmap also helps businesses, giving businesses a helping hand in information and good practices. So that I'm very proud of that it's successful in the past 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Raimo, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you. And first I have to say that the words I had written to my paper, there are so many words that Heidi just said. First of all, I would like to highlight of achievements this awareness rising, which Hedi already mentioned. And I think that has been effective in many ways. For example, when you look at the web pages of the roadmap on carcinogens, you find there 85 different examples of good practices, and there are fact sheets in more than 10 languages. So I think that's one issue how we can share this information and bring concrete actions to workplaces. And also I have to, especially today, I have to mention this, these presidency conferences, because when we are talking about collaboration and being with friends and think the further actions, I think these presidency conferences within these issues has been very successful.
Yeah. Thank you, Raimo. Gertrud, you've spoken a little bit already to us about the Austrian initiatives. What for you now would be the main challenges, do you think, in the road ahead?
In the road ahead? Can you hear me?
Yes.
The challenges are at one side on EU level and on the other side on national level. And I think on EU level we have to discuss further some issues. And thanks to the Finnish presidency that they covered some of these issues at this conference. The REACH-OSH interface will accompany us in our discussions. We have to solve some things, to say it flapsy. The issue of biomonitoring, we have to discuss further, because when we speak of biomonitoring in OSH, I don't think we all have the same in our head what we are speaking about. There are so different approaches in the several countries, and that needs to be, there is clarification necessary. I don't want to prolong it too long, but when I heard this morning from the presentation from the workshop biomonitoring, using biomonitoring during OSH risk assessment, sorry, that's not the Austrian approach. The human being, the worker, cannot be used for risk assessment on workplace. That's too late. You have to set prevention measures first. But we have a third hot potato, so to say. I'm not quite sure if we have solved the issue on methodology, on risk-based occupational limit values. That's a third thing we have to discuss further. And on national level, of course, we were in the last years raising awareness on political level, on OSH stakeholders, on carcinogens, on health at work. We now have to approach the enterprise level, and we count on the regional sectoral social partners. They know their clients, and these regional sectoral social partners should be trained on these issues to bring information further. Thanks.
Thank you. Pelle, would you like to respond to Gertrud there? She's brought up a couple of issues relating to the social partners. They need to be trained as well. And do you want to comment on the biomonitoring? And on anything else you feel like you'd like to comment on?
I can say anything I want. All right, thanks. Well, this is obviously, first a bit more political remark perhaps, that this is obviously an important issue for our members. It's about life or death, and the roadmap gives me hope, because it shows that we have understood this importance and that we have to work work together. It's about having proper rules in place and the means to enforce them. And of course, giving the trade unions a role in this. But it's also a matter of political will. More than half of the member states have signed up to the roadmap, as I've understood. I hope more will join, because it's about putting it high on the political agenda, and we need to keep up the pressure on all EU level, all levels, including the EU level and the EU institutions. And look at the current EU Commission. I mean, they've been ambitious, more ambitious than previous commissions. But we need more, as I said yesterday, 25 binding occupational exposure limits done, and we have 25 to go. And we need more actions on reprotoxic substances, on asbestos and so on. But it's also to reinforcing the role of labor inspectorates and the trade union health and safety representatives. I was actually quite worried, talking about political will, I was a bit worried when I read the mission letter from President-elect Ursula von der Leyen to the Commissioner-designate, Nicolas Schmit. There was nothing mentioned in this letter on health and safety, not a single word. And the ETUC reacted quite strongly on this, and we were happy to hear Nicolas Schmit himself at his approval hearing in the European Parliament mention this issue and putting it high on the agenda. So I think we need to keep up the pressure, because obviously it's not for given, it's not for granted that this work will continue. So this is why I find the roadmap is very important in a political sense, especially as it's carried forward by EU presidencies. It keeps the issue on the agenda. But it's also, of course, also about exchanging best practices and take concrete actions together. I really like the concept of a roadmap because it shows the direction. I mentioned yesterday that the ETUC is calling for a vision of zero work related to cancer. And I see this is a roadmap for this vision, for that goal. But it's also something on the move. And that's what we have to do. I think that's what we need to improve with this roadmap, is that we can't leave it here. We have to bring it home and spread the word, spread the knowledge, spread the experiences and best practices. Because I don't think it's not well known by amongst our members. So we have a role to play. The employers have a role to play, of course. So let's continue this important work together. Thanks.
Thank you. Christa Meester from Business Europe. Are there some things the trade unions have said that you can agree with, or do you disagree with everything?
I was wondering if Brenda asked me that question and I simply answered no, what would happen then? But of course I have something to say. And I just flew in from a negotiation yesterday on another pressing topic, digitalization. So that means I have missed most, if not all, of this conference, so I will refrain from commenting on the content. But what I can say is how much, as a business community, how much we value the roadmap initiative for a number of reasons. And the most important reason is, and I've said it before, if we want to be successful, we have to involve all actors, and I think that is clearly the case in this initiative, because it will take chemistry to come to results, chemistry between all actors, and we need the whole gamma of policy measures, from legislation over information support tools, etc. And what is also very important for the business community, this can never be a one-shot initiative, because unlike most other risks, if you take preventive measures, being that elimination or reduction of exposure to the risks or collective prevention measures, the impact on how you work and the quality of the work is most of the time is quite limited. If you reduce the noise in a machine, it doesn't change the way you work with the machine, it doesn't change the end result, the quality of the product. Different so with chemical substances, with carcinogens. If you eliminate, you have to substitute. If you take other measures reducing, it has an impact quite often on the process, on the chemical process, on how you work, and on the quality of the product. And that is quite challenging for employers, and this is why we need a continuous effort for support, for information, for assistance in trying to reduce the burden of working with those chemicals, and that's why we value this so much. And I also remember quite well, I was there in Amsterdam when we first signed the roadmap. I have signed it now. I think I'm the only one, together with Christa, who has signed all the documents since then. What also reminds me that Amsterdam reminds me that I forgot yesterday to say happy birthday to a colleague, trade union colleague and friend of mine, Wim van Velen, whose Amsterdam team Ajax also won yesterday, so thank you. Congratulations. And congratulations to all. I heard the conference from the content point of view was quite interesting, and as I said, for me the most important is that we continue the effort with all actors together and with the mix of policy measures.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I'm going to come to the EU level in a moment, but first of all, from the German perspective, what do you think now are the big challenges for you taking over? If you like, we're passing the baby to you soon. What do you think will be the big challenges for you, Georg?
Yeah, thank you.
3-year-old baby, a toddler.
So please let me first thank the organizer, thank the Finnish presidencies and all the members of the roadmap for this really successful initiative on carcinogens in Europe. Germany attached great importance on all kinds of activities in Europe in order to protect health and safety of workers when using carcinogens at workplace. We actively support the roadmap on carcinogens as a considerable step forward in Europe and are proud to take over in 2020. We think that we should combine our national activities in this area of the roadmap, and we hope that that also other national activities can be integrated in the roadmap. And we hope that all the members and all the other participants will support us in this area. Our common goal together is the better protection of workers against work-related cancer. Therefore, the focus of our German activities in 2020 will be first to continue the goal of including the remaining most toxic carcinogenic substances in the CMD. We would also promote the risk-based concept for carcinogenic substances, which is already implemented in our German legislation, and it is already working and would be a good concept also for the European level. We would also like, and we have heard that yesterday in the third workshop, we would like to clarify the interface between the REACH and the OSH provisions, so that at the end, both the OSH and the REACH provisions help the businesses to get forward with this, with the carcinogenic substances. And we also would like to initiate activities involving carcinogenic metals and their compounds in order to have good support, especially for the small enterprises in Germany, but also, of course, in Europe, which is very important. And therefore, we really ask you to support us in our next year. There will be a kick-off meeting in January 2020 when we will set up our program for 2020, and I already can invite you to our conference on 9 and 10 November 2020 at the site of the Bauer.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Zinta Podnica, we heard there your Deputy Head of Unit, the Health and Safety Unit of the European Commission, based in Luxembourg. The coming together of REACH and OSH positions, and also I think there was a broader, there's a broader question there to be answered about the interface between EU-level actions and member state actions. Have you any reflections for us?
Start with reminding that yesterday we saw premiere of the video for roadmap, where it was shown as puzzle consisting of many pieces. And when we look at the broader picture, I think in the area of protecting workers from dangerous substance, roadmap is one piece in bigger puzzle, one very important piece. And I think when we speak about protecting workers from dangerous substance, we have to speak about journey, because it's not one day initiative. We have had dangerous substance in the past, we have now, and we will have in the future, well, at least in nearest foreseeable future. And in this journey, we have made some part of the road already. In the last years, it has been quite intensive, sometimes complicated, sometimes difficult, but we have reached very good results. It was mentioned already yesterday. But we have reached not only good results, we have also learned lessons. And one lesson was how to improve interface between OSH and REACH. And during the last years, we have worked very hard together with REACH DGs to make sure that we would avoid any duplications. We would work for synergies and for complementarity, for added value. And I think we have already have very good progress in this area. Of course, we have to continue this good work. We have to keep working together. But another part, which was already mentioned yesterday in the REACH workshop and this morning by some speakers, is not only at EU level, it's also at member state level, it's at company level, at national authority level. It's very important that we don't work one area against another one, but we work together and we see how we can help all together improve better work and protection. We have also learned other things. For example, there was mentioned biomonitoring now, and yes, it is a complicated area. Therefore, we would need to look at that more closely. And I want to thank the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work. They are currently working on the development of guidance document for biomonitoring, which would, I hope, clarify many issues and would provide also good guidance in this area.
Thank you, Zinta. Last but by no means least, in this first round of questions, yours are going to come now, I hope. Elke Schneider from EU-OSHA. Elke, again, looking at that interface between EU and national level, are there any reflections you've had over the past 2 days?
Yeah, I'd like to join some of the previous speakers by saying that it is important to continue the awareness-raising activities. We at the agency, we have had the campaign as a very important instrument, but it's very good that the roadmap continues its activities to keep the momentum of this Healthy Workplaces campaign going and to continue on the awareness-raising. We know that we have limited resources, so it's important to make the best of the limited resources we have. We at the agency have a tradition of gathering information. We have a privileged access to national information, and we want to share these examples of good practices in all areas, whether it's monitoring, whether it's looking at the disease burden, or whether it's good practice examples from the workplace level or from organizations, to share these and to bring these together to help bring this information out there and to support. I think it's important to have the right intermediaries, and one of the examples that was mentioned today was the hairdressers. And this is a good example where hairdressers joined up into a network of engaged people who are promoting better use and the avoidance of using carcinogens to other hairdressers. And we need to reach these intermediaries. We need to really get to these people to have them help us to get the message out there, and also to speak the right language to people. It was already mentioned that we will also contribute to the evidence base with our new cancer risk factor survey. This is filling a gap. We looked at the data sources for the assessment of exposures, but also for the assessment of the burden of disease. And we also looked at the cost of these initiatives, and we actually found that this is one cost-effective way of filling some of the data gaps that exist. What more could I say? I think it's also important to be inclusive if we speak of occupational cancer and carcinogens. And Christa in her intervention mentioned the issue of vulnerable groups. So we really need to address the prevention of all these workers and of workers who don't have easy access to information. We had some examples from the hospitals where communication is difficult. We had examples from the probe study in Belgium, where it shows that still that there's a lot to be done to communicate these messages to the workplace level. But I'd also like to say, I often hear, and I'd like to challenge this perception that good practices for workplaces and the facts and figures are for the policy level. I'd like to challenge that. From my experience, it's really important not only to raise problems, but also to show that it can be easy to solve these problems, and there are sometimes simple measures to address these issues. We have another example from the Good Practice Awards, a large company that deals with road maintenance, and that has developed a very simple, cost-effective methodology that avoids the use of a carcinogenic solvent and avoids exposure of thousands of laboratory workers. So it can be done. And that's maybe also an answer to Chris, who said it can be complicated, but I think we need to demystify prevention. We really need to show that it can be done and to join up forces to get these messages out to the workplaces. And we want to share these experiences and these good practice examples at all levels.
Thank you, Elke. I have a few questions, but first of all, I'm going to see if we've any questions from the audience. Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Björn. Eckhard Metze, German employers. In the coffee break, we had some discussions about ECHA and EU-OSHA work together and REACH and OSH fit together. It seems that some people are still quite skeptical about the functioning of the cooperation. It might be true from the background that they still think that there had been an unfriendly takeover from OSH to ECHA. And so I would be very happy if you could explain us about the practical functioning, about the working together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. Would anybody in the panel... Elke, please go ahead.
EU-OSHA, so I'd like to say that we have a cooperation ongoing not only for this campaign, but we have had a memorandum of understanding since 2009. And I remember the first visit that I had with Jukka Takala at the Chemicals Agency, and there was previous discussion already when we had the 2003 campaign, and the REACH legislation was already discussed at the closing event of this campaign. So it's not a new issue. It is an ongoing discussion. Some of the issues may be challenging. I think that one of the big benefits, and it's been said today by the director of the Chemicals Agency that REACH has generated a lot of information from the workplace level, and it intends to make a link between those who produce and who market chemicals and products and those who use them at the workplaces. And that's where both of the agencies come in to make that easier. And that there's been a REACH review that shows that there are some challenges because it's a lot of information. And I think we can join up forces, and we already have a next meeting. It's an ongoing cooperation in February where we are going to look exactly at that issue, at this communication in the supply chain, and how do you make all this very, very complex information available to the workplace level. There was one keyword was digitalization. So it's a lot of information. How can you filter that information for the workplace level? Maybe even using some of the digital tools to get it out there and get the right information of this huge amount of information to the workplace level to make it usable for the workplaces. And I think that's where we can join up forces and try to find the right way. It's been highlighted by the inspection, the chemicals inspection services, by the labor inspection services in the member states, that this is an issue, and we can strengthen that link that was intended to be strengthened by the REACH legislation. Many of the producers have done a mapping exercise of their users, but there's still a lot to be done, of course. I mean, this is challenging, and I think it's an ongoing challenge that we will try to address together. And I hope that answered some of your doubts.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elke. Chris, you'd also like to respond?
Well, I will try to rephrase what Eckhart was saying. Like in the business community, whenever there is a merger or a buyout or a takeover, whatever you want to call it, the challenge is how you have different company cultures, organizational cultures, you try to make one culture. That is exactly what should not happen here. We need the two different cultures. One culture continuing to look at the more economic, putting on the market, general exposure of public, and the other culture, we need to preserve that with the specificity of looking at workplaces, workers' exposure, taking into account processes, etc. So that is the challenge, I think. Okay, there has been made a decision that was made. It all comes under one roof, but we need this different mindset. We need to preserve that, where you take into account the specificity of dealing with occupational exposure. And that is the challenge, I think.
Does the, yes, Zinta, please, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to add that actually the roles for ECHA and EU-OSHA are very clear. What we ask from ECHA is to provide scientific advice, which would then support our proposal in establishing OELs. In addition to that, of course, as part of their work, they provide information of substance, they provide safety data sheets. And Bilbao agency is dealing with awareness raising, with information provision, with providing tools, good practices which would help workplace. And here, of course, it can work together. What information is provided by Bilbao agency, but also information which is provided under safety data sheets by ECHA, and it's up to workplace and up to employers to use that information complementary as well as they can.
Thank you. Would any of the member states present here like to comment on how that relationship works at national level, whether it's the Netherlands or Finland, Austria, Germany? Gertrud?
Is the question the coordination and working together of the different authorities inspecting? We are in the Austrian labor inspection is in close contact with the chemical inspection, which inspects REACH issues, and not every year, but every third year, we have common focus campaigns, coordinated focus campaigns, but you have to have in mind we have different obligations, we have different sub persons, so to say, being responsible, the employer on one hand for OSH matters and the supplier on REACH matters. So you have to have a clear picture in your head what you're inspecting and what are your duties. But cooperation should happen, so to say, and always can be better, of course.
Thank you. Raimo.
Yeah, thank you. There's not so much to add to what Gertrud just said. For example, in Finland, we have different authorities which enforce OSH legislation and REACH legislation. Labor inspectorates enforce OSH legislation and Finnish Chemical and Safety Agency enforce REACH legislation. And what we have seen that more cooperation is needed, and somebody mentioned digitalization today here, that I think that knowledge, how to use knowledge and shared with digitalization, then it gives us a platform to do more cooperative actions and maybe to understand each other better way, but more cooperation is definitely needed. Yeah. But I have to just one sentence more but for example, because in different member states has different kind of systems. Yesterday in the workshop 3 we heard very good example from Ireland when there's one authority who is enforcing both legislation. So this different kind of situation in different member states.
Yeah, thank you. Heidi, did you want to say something about that?
No, I'm not.
Yeah,
I can add. I don't think I can add a lot on that. The inspectorates in the Netherlands are working together on this, and also on a policy-making level, we have to work from the front door to the back door. So on the front door, you have to work together on the REACH, and on the back door on the inspectorates and the enforcement. So that's the way we do it.
Yeah, thank you, Georg.
Yeah, thank you. In Germany, we are happy that we have both pieces of legislation in one piece of, so we have transposed it in our Gefahrstoffverordnung in Germany, and for the enforcement or for the implementation of this piece of legislation, for these provisions, we have the Bauer, which include both sides, REACH and OSH provisions, and so we have good cooperation. However, we are not living in Germany on islands, so there's whole Europe, and we have to deal with companies from all over Europe, and so therefore it's not enough to have solved our national problems. So we have to look at Europe and see how can the system be well functioning in this area.
Yeah. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Sorry. Sorry to add one thing. Actually, I said something wrong a few minutes ago, because in Finland also, I have to mention that, to be clear, that also the labor inspectorates, they in the act there is that they are enforcing REACH legislation, but in practical way, the chemicals are enforced. The most of the chemicals are enforced by the Finnish Chemicals Agency, and then the use of the chemicals mainly this labor inspectors, but this is just to be clear.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Any final comments from our panelists over there? Pele, anything else to add? And from the audience? No? Well, then I'd like to say, please give a warm thank you to our panelists. And now, for those of you who will be signing the covenant, please stay on the stage, and the rest of you may return to your seats. And then I would like to invite those of you who will be signing to come up and take a seat here. On the stage. And what we will do is we're going to go one by one. over here to actually sign. And we just need somebody to stand behind the big one there so that it doesn't topple over when people are signing it. Thank you. And the other thing that I just want to note is that I'm delighted that the signatures are in order of height. So the tallest people are signing up high. So first of all, can I ask you, Raimo, and also Pele, would you start off at the top rung, please? This is the magic pen.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So the first signature is by Raimo Antila, Ministry of Social Affairs and Health from Finland. And as you know, thank you very much. And now you hand that over to Pele. Thank you. And if you would stay here, because we need some photographs afterwards. And just remember, it's just been signed by Per Hilmerson in the ETUC. And now you're witnessing the very symbolic handover to Germany. All roads lead to Berlin now, I think. Thank you very much, Gertrud. And now Christa, on behalf of the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work, Christa will also sign. And then we have representing Business Europe, we have Christa Meester, or as it's written in my briefing, Christa de Meester. And then representing the European Commission, of course, we have Stefan Olsson, Director. So congratulations and thank you very much. Now, just for the photo with all of them, should they stand here in the middle? And do you want the big one or the small one?
First the big one.
First the big one. Okay, so you all have to stand up and we have to take this over here and then we're going to get a photograph of you all looking happy. How does that look? Does this photo look okay? So, congratulations on handing over the roadmap and that the roadmap continues. And please remember the point we made yesterday, that we're looking beyond the German presidency as well. We're thinking about the French presidency, the Slovenian presidency, the Portuguese presidency, to see if there will be political support for the roadmap on carcinogens. Okay, thank you very much. Now I would ask sorry? Oh, you want the little one as well? Photos with the little one? Yeah, okay, we've got smaller version. Okay, do you want to switch around a little bit? Yeah, so here's a smaller roadmap. And also, please encourage organizations that you know that have not been signed up to the roadmap to do so. And the other thing we should remember is that just over half of all member states have signed in support of the roadmap. So that leaves quite a few member states left to persuade. And for those of you working at European level, you could do a little bit of shoulder shaking, to a gentle shoulder shaking to get them to sign up to the roadmap on carcinogens. So, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And if I could ask the Finnish and the Germans to stay here. Thank you. So, Raimo, I believe you wanted to say a few words. Did you want to say a few words? I know that Rudiger will talk about the Dortmund. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. First of all, we're going. Yeah. Okay. Do you mind if we have one slide?
No. Please,
Yeah.
please. Yes, please.
Yeah. So if you can stay here if you like. No. Sure. Okay. Would you like to say a few words?
I can, yes.
Okay. Well, first, shall we ask Raimo to go first?
Okay.
Yeah. So, Vicar, you're very welcome to come and sit here, and then you can give your slide and you can say a few words as well. So now, on behalf of the Finnish presidency, I welcome back to the podium Raimo and Tiina.
Yes, thank you, dear all. This session in the agenda is called Official Act. Among this official prolonging of this campaign, this is one concrete and meaningful way to show the commitment to prevent occupational cancer. And the more important also is that this act means that this conference is not the end of the roadmap on carcinogens as it was first we thought that possibility could have been. Now the roadmap on carcinogens will continue. I'm very pleased to hand this new covenant to Germany, and I hope all the best with this new covenant, and you can rely on our support. So you're welcome.
Maybe a photograph of Finland handing over to Germany.
It's a real official act.
Fabulous. Thank you. Georg, would you like to say a few words?
Ladies and gentlemen, Germany we are very proud of taking over the initiative, the lead of the roadmap on carcinogens in 2020. We know it's a big task, and there has already a lot of been done, and you have done that. So we would like to set up now a very good program for 2020, and we need your support to be as successful as the whole initiative already is. But we want to get and to reach more. And so therefore we need your support so that we get a step further with the whole initiative. We know that this is not an ongoing activity, and we all have to work together to get to good results, and therefore we need your support. Thank you.
I believe your colleague Rudiger Pipke would like to come and just say a few words about the event that's already underway. The planning of it is advanced. I think we have a slide to show you. There you go. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. She allowed me to jump in and steal you 2 minutes. We are preparing our conference next year. Some things are fixed and some things are still under discussion, but the program is quite advanced. Fixed is the date. It will be the 9th and the 10th of November. And the location will be Dortmund, the city of Dortmund. And the venue will be in the Federal Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. We have there a Working World exhibition. And we think that is a good background for our discussion on the carcinogens to be in the Working World exhibition and to improve safety and health for workers dealing with carcinogenic substances. Some items are on the schedule already. We will talk about the asbestos dialogue. We will finalize maybe in February next year in Germany and share our experience in remediation of asbestos in old buildings. As Georg Hilbert already mentioned, we think we need to further discuss about a risk-based model if you work with carcinogens. We started the discussion last year in Vienna, and we think it's a good idea to continue this discussion. One of our major interest is that the carcinogens and also reprotoxic substances have different power to harm people, and we should keep that in mind and then work on this risk-based models. We also talk about biomonitoring, and we talk about substitution and the REACH-OSH interface, as has been mentioned here in the workshop yesterday and by Björn Hansen also. And it's a very important topic for us, and we will think we need to continue this discussion. And finally, we think it might be a good idea coming to practice to connect it to the German Hazardous Substances Award, which is being awarded every 2 years, and the one we just opened is on carcinogenic substances, so it will match very well to this conference we plan. And that is the way and the planning how it is in the moment. And I would like to welcome you in Dortmund to our conference, which we jointly together organize with the Ministry for Labor and Social Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we'll all look forward to that event. Every European and international gathering is not complete without the addition of a Swedish lawyer. And therefore, it is my great honor to introduce to you Stefan Olsson, who for over 20 years has led a distinguished career in the European Commission. And he is now, of course, as you all know, Director for Employment in the Directorate General Employment of the European Commission. And I'm interested to hear what his concluding remarks will be. The floor is yours, Stefan.
So, very nice to be here. It was very interesting to hear everything this morning and the nice dinner last night. So very much thanks to our Finnish hosts. That really, I mean, to do an event like this, to all the preparations, the logistics, it's a lot of work, and we tend to take it a bit for granted, but really, on behalf of all of us, I think we really need to thank our hosts for this great event and all the work put into it. But I would also like to thank all of you who have participated, who prepared, and as always, when we do OSHA events, there is such a genuine hard work and input from everybody, and as I have a number of other responsibilities, I see the other events, I have to say that the quality of the debate and the willingness to challenge and to challenge the own organization to challenge and to look at the issues is I think, more developed in this context and among you than in many others. So thank you very much. I have a few aspects and a few different angles on the roadmap that I would like to take up. And I'm not really sure how to structure this, but I'll try to get it all in there. First of all, the roadmap in its own right. Clearly, and maybe we can get the slide that I'm going to steal from Elke yeah. I think there were many good slides in today's reporting back and in all the presentations. I got stuck with this one because I think it shows very much the need to move on. In this case, Elke has formulated very well in 6 areas. You can do it in different ways, but this is, if we don't have all of these elements, we all know here that we're not going to get the results on the ground. And the roadmap is really, really a key vehicle to advance on many of these issues. So, and we heard from many of you about the real underlying work, the need for understanding, the challenges for young workers, for employers to understand all of these issues. So that work is essential, and the roadmap takes all of that up. And I think there we can all, and you can all be proud of that work. There is another political aspect of the roadmap, which is important to me in the general work on the social pillar. Because, of course, the whole idea of the social pillar is that it's not just one aspect, but that EU action, for example, but it tries, the concept of the pillar is that everybody does what they do best, no? And that's, and under their own responsibilities. And I think the pillar is, in my mind, perhaps the best example of how we realize the social pillar and the principle 10 of health and safety in reality, because here all the actors are taking their responsibility and in order to realize a common goal. And so this is, for me, what the pillar is about. For me, it's a very good example also when we discuss and try to explain what the pillar is. So that's another important aspect for me of this work on the roadmap. Then the roadmap as a political momentum, it's been touched upon several times. And if we go back to 2016 in Amsterdam, we really, I think the event, the presidency event that the Dutch presidency staged was very important for us in the Commission. And many of you have touched upon this, but we should not forget that for, I don't know how many, 10 years, we had done nothing in terms of OELs, of binding OELs. And we needed to start that process. And without going far beyond what I should say, I mean, the internal debates in the Commission, the discussions in terms of why are we doing this, the issues with REACH, and many, and you know this yourselves, the high-level people who finally take the decision on what to do and not to do. I mean, this is very complex, and we could easily have gone another way. We could easily have had somebody high up in the Commission who would have said, not stimulated by at that time Björn, for example, in environment, who knew very well this, but you could have somebody up and say, why are you doing chemicals now? I mean, we do chemicals in REACH, stop this, it's just confusing for business. It could have been a decision. We don't always take the best decisions, and the whole, when we discussed the better regulation, and until we could come to explaining to the experts on administrative burden that OELs are removing administrative burden, not adding it. But all of that we needed a momentum, and the Dutch event was a very important catalyst in getting that momentum. And from then on, we could continue to produce proposals. So I think that's a political aspect of the roadmap, which has been very important in this very tough work by the advisory committee, by the colleagues in the commission, and then throughout the legislative process to keep this going. And I would then move on to maybe the point that Pelle raised, which is this not to take it for granted. And I think that's very important. It's very human now to take it for granted. It's been very successful, the updating of the CMD, but we continuously need to justify ourselves. We now have a new parliament now, we have a new context, and I'm confident that we will continue. But it's important not to take it for granted. And here, I think the REACH-OSH cooperation is essential. It's essential because we show everybody that this is something we take seriously, that we try to solve together. We know that the legal acts have not been adopted in harmony. I mean, we all know that. So, but the way we can bridge this is about the type of cooperation we've had here today and running up to this and will have in the future. And I was very, very happy to see that this event brought in ECHA. And perhaps if we decide to have another signature, we should also have ECHA on there. So that's an important, that is important. And I would even, you might think I'm a bit dramatic here, but this is part of my daily work. There is, I mean, the European project overall is not to take for granted. And there are a lot of people, and I don't want to stimulate any paranoia, but there are a lot of people who look for any opportunity to criticize and to put doubt into European action. And I think that the REACH-OSH interface can be a very nice thing to use against moving forward on chemicals, because you can use it, you can play with it, you're uninformed, or so therefore we have a duty to make this work, also for a bigger purpose. And you know, Brexit is happening right now, and we kind of got used to it. But it will come and come and come. And chemicals is a very, very sensitive issue, and it can be used in journalism, in politics, also in very negative senses. So it is important that we are solid, that we work together. So then maybe on the point on the more technical side, I think the fact that we are working here, as I think in all the areas I work, I see this, but we work here with OSH and the updates under Article 153 of the treaty, and here the Swedish lawyer comes out. No? This is a legal basis which has certain rules. One rule is that it's minimum conditions. Another rule here, it is that this is not a tool for harmonization. It is actually framed so that it supports member states' action. So we need to do whatever we can within this legal basis, but we should be careful not to go outside. And here we are, when we talk about details of implementation and enforcement, there is an issue of the frame of the legal basis. And let's keep that in mind. And sometimes this gets confused because, of course, REACH is another type of tool. So, and there is one element here, which is co-decision. Of course, when we do 153, when we do OSH under the CMD or CAD or the Asbestos Directive, we are going in a dialogue between the Council and the Parliament. Our proposals is only the very, very start of a process. And that is something I think that we forget. And I share that, but then when I sit together with some of you from the presidency in the discussions between Council and Parliament, then you realize very soon that this is how it works. And we cannot forget here that the Council is, of course, indirectly part of the preparation through the advisory committee. But the Parliament is completely left out until the proposal has been adopted by the Commission, always following the advice of the advisory committee. So, but here we have a challenge. And it's not, don't get me wrong, I'm not challenging democracy, I'm not challenging the Parliament, but it is a complex process. And we need to, and this is something you all know we have had to deal with, in the sense that you have politicians who might not always be so comfortable with the fact that they are basically asked to focus on a very specific issue. And they might think that other issues are bigger, more important. And the fact that most of the chemicals these days go under what we call comitology, so it is outside of the material view of the political, the democratic body of the European Parliament, puts an enormous pressure. And this is something we need to be careful with, we need to keep in mind. And because sometimes in our discussions internally, I think we forget this. And there's a lot of communication needed, there's a lot we need to be very careful here in what we propose, how we do things, so that we don't end up with something that was not at all intended. So that I think will be a very important issue for the future. Just to go back on another issue that Pelle raised, I would just like to signal that the Commission starts, the first working day of the Commission is Monday. So the fact that we've had this delay and means that, of course, there is a nervousness, but the intention, as I understand it, by this new Commission, is to present a work program in the middle of January for next year. And there, of course, it will be more clear the exact proposals and all of this. And there is a bit of a challenge with the pillar here, I think, because if you see it from a political perspective, you say the pillar, and you've mentioned 20 principles and maybe 40 areas, or something like this. So, in a way, the pillar is good, but also it means that you don't, because I think the comment you made, there is not a specific mention on OSH. No, but OSH is a central part of the pillar, so OSH is mentioned. And I think we will see when we come to the work program, and also in a social communication, which Commissioner Schmidt, under his responsibilities, which should come out in January, I'm rather confident that OSH will be emphasized there as a part of the pillar, of course. But so I would not be too worried there. But I'm saying this with a big reservation, is that I'm not the ones, as you know, taking the decisions. So those were some of the things, and I'm going a bit beyond, but I take this opportunity to address all of you in that sense. I just to finish off, maybe again on this issue of OSH and going back to this slide. As I said, I deal with a number of different areas, and what impresses me with OSH, it is really that we go further in terms of, it is not only an EU rule that is being adopted and then we let it go. And then depending on national situations, various things are done. Now, what I see in terms of social dialogue, in terms of implication of governments, and is that OSH, I think it is the area where we go the furthest in the whole social area. Don't say I said this if you meet one of my colleagues, but that where we really take it seriously. It's not symbols. We are really going from the adoption of the EU rule all the way down to the implementation, and we really try our best to do this. And here I would come in on the agencies. I am very, very proud of being able to work together with Christa and now with Björn, because as I see here, the agencies are really, really complementing the work in a fantastic way, in that, and this is not easy. It's not easy not to get overlaps with what the EU is doing, with what the national governments are doing, but in this area, and now with this cooperation, which has been going on for some time, we are really managing to find and together do a whole. And I'm really seeing this as really a difference from many other policy areas where there is much more friction, overlaps, and personalities involved, which make it much more difficult. And in OSH, I think we can be really proud together that we are really we are going to business, workers, EU institutions, agencies, governments, we are so focused on the same result. And this is something that I think the roadmap symbolizes, our events symbolize, and I'm very happy that the German presidency will take this forward. And I'm sure that this will go on for a long, long time. And also coming back, I don't think that the as you said, Pelle, the 50 substances, I think we should look at, this is a process that never ends. This is a process that goes on, and we need to bring it all together. So in that way, I'm very proud and happy that we have signed this today and that this work will continue, and also thank everybody again for all the work you're putting into it. Sorry for having been a bit long, but I wanted to make all those points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. And now, Raimo, would you like to come and say some final concluding remarks?
Thank you, Brenda, and thank you, Stefan. Dear friends, we have had an interesting and intensive conference. First of all, we want to thank Netherlands, Austria, EU-OSHA, Business Europe, ETUC, for initiating the Roadmap on Carcinogens initiative. The whole action team has been very successful. And during these days, we have heard what is needed to tackle exposure to carcinogenic substances. And because we have heard them already, I have written them already here, but I don't repeat them, don't worry. I also think that we have had a good meeting here in Helsinki. We have all had a lot of new information on carcinogens and very constructive discussions. We have also heard that there are still challenges or hot potatoes, as we have heard, and there's still very much to do. But because of this positive drive and your commitment, I'm very hopeful and really convinced that we are going to the right direction. We are also pleased to note that the political guidelines of the President-elect of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, also include European Plan for Fight Cancer. As many cancers are caused by carcinogens at workplace, prevention of work-related exposure to carcinogenics should be seen as an important part of this fight. In line with this, we hope that setting binding limit values for carcinogens will continue effectively. Also, the continuation of the roadmap on carcinogens from Helsinki to Berlin is bring one important element to fight against cancer. I also would like to stress that we all have a role to play. As the name of our conference is Working Together, we can all do our share on raising awareness and seeking for solutions. I want to thank you all for participation to this roadmap on carcinogens action scheme and to this Finnish presidency conference. And wish to see you in Berlin next year. And I want to thank Germany to prolonging this campaign and also welcome ECHA to do this part of this important work. So, we still have a lunch, but I want to wish you a safe trip home and keep up the good work fighting against occupational cancer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, just a final word. Somebody has lost a lovely glove. It's black leather and it has some colourful insets. It's downstairs, and it would be terrible if you didn't get it back, because I saw a picture of it and it looks really smart. There are some people here we need to say thank you to. Of course, our Finnish hosts, who were absolutely impeccable in their hospitality towards all the guests. And within that team, within that organization, there is a core team, the A-team of people who have been working day and night to make this event a success. I'm particularly thinking of Rita Gronrus, Maria Oksa, Hannela Jorvelius, Sirku Sarikoski, and of course, a special place from my heart, who was doing all of the liaison with Bilbao, Rita Sauni. Thank you. And we would also like to say thank you to the international unit here in the Finnish ministry, as well as all of the volunteers who came along with to help with the registration, the amazing Alex there at the back, the technician with his team of cool people. Our very competent interpreters, without whom we would not have been able to communicate successfully. Thank you. And so now, a little later than planned, we'd like to invite you to lunch. Safe travels home, and all roads now lead to Berlin. Thank you. Bye.